NBA season is finally upon us, finally here, and I'd say it's off to an immaculate start. We saw what happened in the beginning with NBC being back, OKC vs Houston being an absolute thriller, and it will continue the very next day. As of this recording, yesterday's slate of games were exciting for the most part, including the one I happened to watch the most, Miami vs Orlando. Before the season even started, this was one where I had my eyes on for a while because not only are these two close rivals, both of them are expected to make huge strides this season, especially the Magic, and I'd say it lived up to the hype. There were a lot of crazy and underrated aspects, so let's get into it. I think the best part about this game was how you were never sure about who will take the lead, who will gain control, because it was always back and forth. Leads were constantly exchanging, like each team would have big runs, they would respond in big ways. At one moment you would see Miami generate a 10-0 run, then Orlando will come back with an 11-0 run. Down the line Miami will come up with a 10-3 run, then Orlando would respond with an 11-4 run, something like that. Each teams would always come up with big time shots and very aggressive and physical defense, which not only was that to be expected, I wouldn't really have it any other way. But one of the most surprising parts of this game was how in the first half, both teams were super efficient on offense. Not only was Orlando leading Miami 69-65 at halftime, both teams made more than 50% of their looks, while also nailing 44% from three-point land. Definitely unexpected, but a pleasant surprise considering what we saw from them these past seasons. However, both of these teams did come down to earth in the second half. Things did dial back on efficiency, especially with their three-pointers. Orlando only hit 30%, while Miami was much worse, shooting 23%. But despite the poor shooting, it was still really exciting basketball nonetheless, especially when it came to the clutch. Those last 5 minutes, while the offensive execution wasn't really perfect, you could tell that whoever's going to win this game is not only going to hit the big time plays, but also the little things. Because when the shots aren't falling, how can you leave an impact? How can you make sure you get your team a win if the scoring isn't a sure guarantee? And I feel like Orlando did more of that. Now before we get into the other factors that contributed to this result, I do want to shout out Miami's transition offense for a bit because it was actually insane how successful most of it was. I get that it was a point of emphasis Coach Spoelstra made in the preseason essentially, but man, it was hitting on all cylinders. So even though they lost the game, I felt like this was a very crucial aspect. It was probably something that was much better executed than I'm assuming what the coach staff initially thought. Now let's continue to the main takeaways. The first one being the new acquisitions in Norman Powell and Desmond Bane. When those trades were made, everyone knew that it wouldn't really take long for them to get accustomed and help the team. However, they made their impact right out of the gate. Norman Powell chipped in with 28 points, hitting 50% of his three-pointers. And on the other side, Bane put out 23 points along with 43% from three. And when we talk about seamless fits, both of these were really the perfect depiction. Norman Powell pretty much never changed. What we saw from him in terms of aggressiveness and scoring on the Clippers is pretty much the same thing for the Heat, which is the best case scenario, as it never really felt like there was a moment where Powell was uncomfortable or something like that. He was always looking for his spots, he was forcing the issue in free throws, and although it's unlikely he'll put a near 30-point performance almost every game, if he continues being this comfortable in scoring, then I can see him definitely holding the fort down until Hero returns from injury. And for the other side, Desmond Bane, I mean, threes going down in Orlando in general is such a beautiful sight because it's such a long time coming, but not only was he a great threat from behind the arc, especially in the first half, he managed to convert some inside looks as well. Sometimes Miami would do a nice job forcing him off the perimeter, but Desmond Bane wasn't really fazed by it. He made a couple of tough layups, including one where it was high off the glass, avoiding Bam's block. I mean, talk about finesse. And I'm sure when we talk about the Magic side of things, that couldn't have been more reassuring. And I'll admit I did wanted to see a bit more actions involving him, Paolo and Franz, because early on we saw Bane and Paolo be in a pick and roll. Sometimes the execution wasn't that perfect, but I'd say that's more credit to the Miami Heat defense. We did see a few more Bane and Paolo pick and rolls as the game went down during the fourth quarter, so there should definitely be an emphasis on more practice and the both of them getting a feel for each other. Also, I really want Bane to have similar stuff with Franz, which, speaking of, I felt like Franz Wagner was the leading guy today. Even though he and Paolo had the same amount of points, you could tell Franz was doing pretty special stuff. We all know how effective he was on the inside, but also he was pretty efficient with his threes. His three-point shot looks a bit different too. Like before we seen that flick of the wrist, but this new one feels like he starts from the base and albeit very slow, but all of that energy starting at the bottom and then it transmitting to his arm, with the release more being in one slow motion. I'm not sure if it'll lead to good things, but that was a new thing that seemed to have appeared. And speaking of new things to work on, I guess that was a nice transition in a way. Paolo Banchero, he also contributed with 24 points, but his playmaking awareness, it does need a lot more work, because most of the times when he got the ball, Miami would send doubles. Sometimes the extra man would be there for a short time before he went back to his original assignment, and then there were plenty of other times where it was just full on double teaming, trapping, getting all the hands in his face, and I'd say it was really successful. Paolo committed a lot of turnovers because of that. Sometimes the kick out passes were pretty slow too. Occasionally he would also force up a few tough shots because of this double teaming, and I'd say even though his playmaking wasn't ideal, it's a pretty good thing Paolo was going through these issues very early. No doubt we all know how capable he is, how high his potential of a scorer is, so this issue of double teaming might be a trend when Orlando faces a lot more elite defenses. So I feel like the earlier they try to solve this conundrum, the better it will result for the Magic later on. However, a win was a win, and it wasn't just the new acquisitions making some noise and only being in the spotlight. There were other great players as well. For Miami, some pretty comfortable signs. Jaime Jaquez Jr., he had himself a game. He was super efficient from the field, and there were a couple possessions where he had some fancy footwork. And last but not least, Davion Mitchell, who I would argue as the second best player for the Heat. In terms of his performance on both sides of the ball, I'd say it was phenomenal. I mean, when talking about offense, I feel like that's what I took away the most. Because although I'm sure some Heat fans would have loved for him to hit at least one of his 3-point looks in the second half, he pretty much did everything else well. He would also playmake effectively. 12 assists. That's right, 12 assists from Davion Mitchell, and I knew he was a solid passer. But this game, he was exceptional in making the right reads. I'm not sure if improving his court vision was something that he wanted to work on during the offseason, but it's definitely off to a promising start. Obviously, I don't think he will average double-digit assists, but having more opportunities like this, maybe the 6 assist area isn't too far off. And defensively, we all know how special he is. He's nicknamed Off Night for a reason. Most possessions you will see him chasing Desmond Bane off of screens, but there are times where he was guarding Tyus Jones, Paolo Banchero for a few possessions, and during those possessions, it worked out well for him. So overall, I really loved Off Night's performance. Miami is so lucky to have him. But in terms of notable performances, it wasn't just Miami. There's also a reason why Orlando was the victor, especially the unsung hero in my opinion, Tristan Da Silva. His performance might not get shouted out by a ton of people, but I felt like his shots were super big time. The Magic were definitely not going to be in the position they were in if it weren't for Da Silva making some crucial threes. I even saw him handle a couple of pick and roll possessions. I didn't expect that, but he wasn't bad at it. I mean, it did start off pretty bad with a botched lob pass to Goga, but the very next pick and roll, he made a nice difficult layup. But the threes, man, the threes are what I love the most from him. He looked confident making those looks too. And I know Da Silva didn't have the greatest shooting season in his rookie year, but so far, he's pretty good. Da Silva's performance was actually super good that it led to Coach Mosley trusting him enough to be a part of that crucial fourth quarter rotation. I mean, Jalen Suggs was subbed in 5 minutes and 30 seconds, and while one could argue that's a little bit too late, I saw it as Da Silva making an impact and giving just enough rest to Jalen Suggs, which is a nice transition to another player I want to give a shout out. Jalen Suggs, I forgot how much I missed this man because he was so injured last season, but there's a reason why Orlando has him as kind of a defensive anchor. There's a reason why they gave him that big contract because of games like this. Not only did he also contribute on the offensive end with a couple of made threes on his own, defensively, he was a dog. And despite it taking some time for him to get accustomed to everything, because there were a couple moments early on where he was a little bit too early in his steal anticipation, his defensive prowess during the clutch moments of this game, he had a very significant steal on Powell, he drew a charge on Powell, and his help defense, I just can't get over how great it was. Because those moments aren't going to show up on the box score, but it was definitely enough to limit Miami in their offensive looks. Because let's say they beat the initial defender, out of the corner of the Heat player's eyes, they would see Suggs just scampering towards the area in which they thought was open at first. I could sense that Miami did panic a bit and had to resort to some backup plan on offense because Suggs was always at the right place at the right time. He's one of their best defensive players for a reason, and not only was he super effective in being a defensive anchor, he was hyping the crowd up. There were definitely moments where Orlando needed some fanfare behind him. It was actually pretty funny during the moments of the game. I could hear "Let's Go Heat" chants. Now I know Heat fans are known to have their presence felt during away games. But if you're Orlando, of course you should not accept that. So having someone like Jalen Suggs being this wonderful energizer, like every time the camera will cut to him, he's always waving to the crowd. And man, I felt like it did pay off big time. I heard the Orlando crowd get louder and louder as we got closer to the final wire in the game. And I almost forgot to shout out Wendell Carter Jr., which is kind of crazy. During that last stretch of the fourth quarter, he was huge, so I apologize to Wendell. I didn't want to, put him aside. And I felt like it was a tale of two halves for Carter Jr. Or if we can get specific, a tale of 3 quarters and 1 quarter. Because the first 3, he was having a lot of trouble for the most part. Foul trouble, offensive execution, sometimes a little bit slow with his drop coverage. But that fourth quarter stretch, he absolutely redeemed himself. It started off with that nice block and then the offensive rebounds. I'd say Miami did a nice job because aside from a few Goga putbacks, there was no really dominating force on the boards until Wendell Carter Jr. decided to be that man, be more physical than Bam Adebayo. And yeah, Carter Jr. overall just stepped up big time. And before we leave, Bam Adebayo, I wouldn't be as disappointed if he wasn't paid that gigantic contract. His performance was actually one of the few questions I had before the game started. How will his shot diet look? Will he actually act like the captain? That responsibility is put on his shoulders for a reason, but it never really felt like there was a moment where Adebayo decided to step up and have this mindset of, I'm the captain, I'm the veteran, let me show that I can be the leader when things get tough. And it was frustrating because there were flashes of Bam being aggressive, especially late in the second quarter. There were back-to-back possessions of giving Adebayo the ball in the post and just letting him go at Wendell Carter Jr. He was pretty successful. He forced a lot of trips to the free throw line. So not only did I feel like the Heat kind of went away from that, Adebayo became more of a finesse player. So yeah, that was the Battle of Florida. I loved it. It could not have been off to a better start. Also, I don't want to add on to the over-assumptions, but is Jonathan Isaac already the odd man out? He only played 7 minutes in that game and I don't remember a single thing he had done other than shooting a corner 3, which the defense will take every time. Now again, it's only the first out of 82 games. But when we talk about Isaac's play, a lot has definitely changed. I mean, things were looking so bright for him when he first returned from injury, and then it just felt like starting from this past season, everything kind of went downhill. So yeah, his value being that low while given that contract might be a piece from trade deadline, but I might be overreacting here. But what do you guys think? What are your thoughts and opinions? Maybe about this game or the other matchups in that exciting slate that we just witnessed yesterday? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.